Today, when we watch films starring Louis de Funès, we see not just an actor, but an era of French cinema. His characters are a reflection of their time, but their humor, their emotions remain understandable and relatable to audiences worldwide, regardless of age or nationality. His Man of 40 Faces has become a symbol of comedy. And every time we remember this great artist, our imagination conjures up not only his explosive laughter but also the image of a man who found true harmony in the quietness of his garden, in the scent of roses that bore his name. He was a symphony of grimaces, a traveler through the labyrinths of life, and an eternal admirer of the beauty that bloomed in the silence of his beloved chateau. His story is proof that it's never too late to find your calling and that true talent will always find its way to people's hearts. Forget the explosive laughter that erupted from the screens. Behind the mask of France's most famous comedian hid a completely different person. He was a descendant of aristocrats who rose from a simple pianist in Parisian bars to a world star. For years, his talent went unnoticed, hidden in tiny film cameos. But how did this quiet gardener, who loved growing roses, manage to captivate the hearts of millions with his turbulent and unforgettable characters? Uncover the mystery of Louis de Funès's double life. The saga of the life of Louis Germain David de Funès de Galarza unfolded not as a flash of lightning success, but as a slow, persistent journey through the fog of obscurity to the bright sun of recognition. His birth in Courbevoie, a suburb of Paris, in 1914, was a kind of challenge to fate. His parents, Carlos and Leonor, both came from ancient Spanish and a little Portuguese, aristocratic families. They left Seville, where their marriage faced family opposition, and found refuge in France, dreaming of a new, calmer life. But even in a foreign land, the echoes of the past and the search for a decent living created a certain backdrop for Louis's childhood. His father, a lawyer by education, worked as a diamond cutter in France, a profession that required precision and patience but did not bring the former status or significant wealth. He was a reserved man, focused on his work. His mother, Leonor, was a refined woman, but with a hot, emotional temperament. She could be charming and kind, but her temper, which flared up suddenly, left the child with a sense of the world's unpredictability. Louis later confessed that many of the comical traits of his future characters, their impulsiveness, and sometimes their pettiness, he observed in his mother. Her ability to transition from instant joy to turbulent indignation was for him a kind of real-life theater. Little Louis could sit for hours in the corner of the living room, watching his mother gesture, how her face changed, how her voice went from a gentle purr to a menacing thunder. These observations became his first lessons in acting, although he didn't even guess it at the time. School years were a real test for Louis. The education system, with its strict rules and the need to memorize large amounts of information, was alien to Louis's lively, restless nature. The exact sciences caused boredom and incomprehension. He recalled later how he sat at his desk, looking at algebra formulas or physics equations, and felt as if his brain simply refused to process this information. Instead, he was a master of mischief. His rebellious spirit and irrepressible desire to make his classmates laugh often led to him being outside the classroom door, and sometimes even the educational institution altogether. He could, during a boring lesson, quietly start mimicking the teacher, copying their facial expressions, gestures, intonations. It started with barely noticeable movements, then became more expressive, and soon the whole class was quietly giggling, watching the little performance at the back desk. When the teacher noticed this, their anger was terrible, but for Louis, it was a kind of triumph. He managed to evoke an emotion, to break the routine. The story of attempting to play Zorro with a lasso woven from shoelaces, which almost ended in tragedy for one of his comrades, or the antics in workshops that led to expulsion, testify to his unrestrained energy and desire to evoke emotions, even if they were the anger and irritation of adults. One time, working in a sewing workshop, he got so carried away throwing pins at a canary that he caused an uproar throughout the workshop and was immediately fired. Another time, staging a fireworks display with firecrackers in a photo studio, he almost burned down the entire premises. These incidents were not indicative of malice, but rather an excess of unused energy and a desire to turn the mundane into an adventure. After failing at school, Louis was forced to look for work. And here began a long marathon of changing professions. He worked as a draftsman, trying to squeeze his wild imagination into the framework of lines and angles, but quickly realized it wasn't for him. Sitting for hours over papers, drawing monotonous lines, was true torture for him. He felt his energy, his need for movement and self-expression fading. He was a courier, delivering packages through the streets of Paris, observing the life of the city and its inhabitants. Every passerby, every shopkeeper, every taxi driver, for him, they were potential characters, whom he instantly analyzed, memorizing their gait, gestures, manner of speaking. He tried his hand at decorating shop windows, where his artistic nature could at least partially manifest, creating compositions with goods, adding his own touch, but he didn't stay there long either. Even working as a milkman, which required early rising and walking the blocks, was only a short-lived stage. Each of these experiences, though not bringing satisfaction from the work itself, added to his baggage of observations, new characters, new types, new habits of people, which he would later brilliantly embody on screen. He learned to understand people's psychology, their reactions to stress, joy, surprise. But his real outlet and the place where his talent could breathe freely was music. Louis loved the piano from childhood. He didn't have a classical education, he played by ear, sometimes not even knowing how to read music, but he did it with soul and improvisation. During the war and in the early post-war years, working as a pianist in Parisian bars became his main source of income. He played in establishments in the Pigalle area, where a special atmosphere reigned, a mix of fatigue, hope, and the desire to forget. The air was thick with the smell of cigarettes, alcohol, and perfume. The voices of the patrons merged into a hum, punctuated by laughter and shouts. Louis sat at an old, sometimes out-of-tune piano, playing jazz, blues, popular tunes of the time. But he didn't limit himself to just playing. Between musical numbers, or even during them, he began to play with his face and body. Each musical passage was accompanied by lively facial expressions, expressive gestures, improvised pantomimes. When the music became faster, his fingers flew over the keys, and his body seemed to bounce on the stool. When the melody became sad, his face expressed deep sorrow, and his shoulders slumped. He built entire mini-performances between musical numbers, telling stories without words, using only the language of body and face. Bar patrons, tired of routine and war, found not only music but also true comedy in his performances. They laughed, watching his grimaces, his little pantomimes. He was often asked to play something funny, and he responded with a performance that was not just music, but also a little comedy that unfolded right before their eyes. It was there, in the semi-darkness of the bars, to the accompaniment of jazz, that the unique plasticity and expressiveness were born that would later make him a film legend. His nickname Fufu was already known to many in those circles. He felt that it was here, at the piano, that he could be himself, express his energy, his view of the world. Through music, he entered the world of art. He met artists, writers, actors, directors who also sought inspiration or simply relaxed in these establishments. And it was then, at Renée Simon's drama courses, that he met Jean Barthélemy. She was from a different world, the world of literature, intellectual conversations, family traditions stretching back to the glorious lineage of Maupassant. Her tenderness, sophistication, and romanticism, her passion for La Fontaine's poetry, which she knew by heart, captivated Louis. He played the piano for her, told funny stories from his turbulent life, showed her his improvised miniatures, trying to impress her with a talent that had not yet been appreciated by the world. Their marriage in 1943 became not only a union of two hearts but also a merging of different worlds. Jean became his quiet harbor, his support, who believed in his talent even when Louis himself doubted and faced rejections. She was his most faithful listener, his first critic, his inspiration. Despite Jean's support, the path to acting recognition was incredibly long and difficult. His first film role in 1945 in The Temptation of Barbizon was tiny, almost imperceptible. He appeared on screen for a few seconds as a doorman. This was just the beginning. For almost 20 years, Louis de Funès remained a supporting actor, a bit player, or even just an extra. He appeared in various films, from serious dramas to light comedies, but his face appeared on screen for mere seconds or minutes. He played doormen who opened doors, waiters who took orders, policemen in the background, passers-by on the street, petty clerks, servants. Often he was given roles without dialogue, where he only needed to react to a main character's line or perform some minor action. There were times when his name wasn't even listed in the credits, and he was just one of many nameless faces on screen. It was a period of trials, disappointments, doubts. He saw his peers or even younger actors getting lead roles, achieving fame, while he remained in the shadows, constantly in supporting parts. Why? What's wrong with me? He must have thought in those moments. His energy, his vivid facial expressions, his natural tendency for eccentricity seemed excessive, clownish, unsuitable for serious cinema to directors. Many advised him to be more restrained, less noticeable, act more naturally. But Lewis could not and would not betray his nature. He believed that precisely in this excessiveness lay his strength. He continued to work, to hone his skills, to observe, to analyze. He stood in front of a mirror for hours, practicing the slightest movements of his eyebrows, the corners of his lips, his eyes. He learned to control every muscle in his face, turning it into a tool for expressing the widest range of emotions. He studied the facial expressions of people in everyday life, memorized their habits, their gait, their mannerisms. All of this became material for his future characters. He believed that one day he would be noticed, that the world would appreciate his unique talent. And that day came. Gradually, directors began to give him slightly larger roles, where he could at least partially stretch his wings. His unique comedic gift, his ability to turn the simplest scene into an explosion of laughter, began to be appreciated. In the 1950s, he appeared in several films where his roles were already more significant, and audiences began to remember him. His name appeared more frequently in the credits, though not yet in the leading positions. It was a period of slow but steady ascent.